At a time when every organization wants an edge in performance, Dr. Rodger Dean Duncan is one expert who makes a real difference. He's an award-winning, best-selling author and thought leader on leadership, change, teamwork, communication, and human performance. He's been an executive with 2 Fortune 100 companies, and his consulting clients have included some of the best organizations in the world, as well as cabinet officials in 2 White House administrations. His work has been featured in top media outlets that reach business people around the world. Rodger Dean Duncan has been there. He knows what it takes to create competitive advantage, and he can help you and your organization transform good intentions into great performance.
I've done a lot of work in the nuclear business. By the way, I'm one of only 2 or 3 natives of Oklahoma who can pronounce nuclear. Just want you to know. The other 2 couldn't be here today. I've worked at about 40 nuclear stations, and I was at a nuclear station during an outage. An outage is when the plant is shut down. They're not generating electricity. They're not making money. They're spending a lot of money real fast. So, of course, they're very eager to finish the outage safely and on time and on schedule. So I'm in the outage control center, and it's a big room with high ceilings, big monitors for closed-circuit TV, and lots of people with computers feverishly working. It's a 24-hour-a-day thing, and with military precision. Then the senior executive walks into the room, and he has a look on his face like, we really stepped in it. That's a technical term. And I said, what's going on? My job, by the way, was to observe and coach on leadership issues, organizational effectiveness issues, not technical issues. I said, what's going on? He said, well, we got a problem. I said, is it a safety issue? He says, no, it's not a safety issue. And I'm thinking, we'll see. Because I think he's defining safety differently than I am. He's thinking in terms of radiological issues, industrial accidents. I'm thinking in terms of psychological safety, leadership kind of things, culture things. I said, what happened? He said, a crew went into a part of the plant and they set up some scaffolding and they started to dismantle some equipment, and they worked their entire 12-hour shift. The next crew came in and they continued to dismantle the equipment, and the third crew came in, and as soon as they walked in the area, one of the guys on that third crew said, hey, this is the wrong equipment. We're not scheduled to do this work until the next outage next year. Oops. I said, what's that going to cost you? He said, it's going to cost us about a day and a half. We're going to have to put all that equipment back together, go over to the other side of the plant and start working on the equipment that we were scheduled to work on. I said, what's electricity selling for these days? He said, about $50 a megawatt. I said, okay, let's do the math. That's a 1,000 megawatt unit. That's $50,000 of lost revenue an hour times a day and a half. That's about $1.8 million, plus you have several hundred supplemental workers here. That's going to cost the company well over $2 million. He said, yeah, it really is. I said, I bet you look forward to making that phone call to headquarters. He said, no, I really don't. I said, but it's not a safety issue. I'm just kind of reeling him in at this point. He said, no, it's not a safety issue. And he stops mid-sentence. He said, I guess it was. I said, what happened? He said, well, on that first crew, we have one of our really good managers, and he tells his people, be grateful you have a job, don't ask questions, just do what you're told. As it turns out, there were a couple of people on that crew who knew it was the wrong equipment, but they had been taught, don't challenge the boss, don't challenge the status quo, just do what you're told. On the second crew, pretty much the same thing. On the third crew, we have a real sharp manager, and he tells his people, hey, we're smart people, and our job is to help each other work smarter. So I'm going to be challenging your thinking, and I expect you to challenge my thinking. It was easy for somebody on that crew to say, hey, this is the wrong equipment. Now, can you believe something like that could happen and cost the company $2 million? I've been around enough to know that that happens more than we might want to believe. And it probably happens thousands of times a day where it doesn't cost $2 million, but the cumulative effect can be enormously expensive. When you hire bright people and then dumb them down with a culture that has some unintended consequences. Many years ago, my wife and I took our family on a vacation in the mountains. Children were little, and It was in the summertime, and I got some hay fever issues, so I decided to drive down to the bottom of the mountain to the convenience store that was there and buy some over-the-counter allergy medicine. And I got what I wanted, and I was headed back to the cash register when I noticed off to the side a little lady. She looked like she was about 80 years old. And she was doing something I'd never seen anybody do before. You see it all the time now, but there was a display of eyeglasses, not sunglasses, but clear eyeglasses, and she was trying on the eyeglasses. She finally found a pair that she seemed to like. She had a very self-satisfied look on her face, and she had them in her hand, and she headed toward the cash register, and I motioned for her to go before me. And as she's checking out, I said, ma'am, I've never seen anybody buy eyeglasses in a convenience store. I bet it's really hard to find a pair that's just right. And she looks up at me and said, yep, sure is, mister, especially since I'm buying them for my neighbor. Now, I can't recommend that lady's approach to optometry, but I think she should be applauded for her desire to see the world as her neighbor saw it. And good leaders work very hard to understand the perspectives, the frames of reference of the people around them. On your team, I hope you have people who disagree with each other civilly. One of the characteristics of a high-performing team is that people are willing to challenge each other's thinking, and they're willing and eager to try to understand each other's perspective. If you have 10 people around a table and they agree on everything, you probably have the wrong 10 people around the table. Now, at the end of the day, they need to agree on how they're going to go forward, but it's perfectly okay to disagree. I think empathy, what this woman was practicing, is really critical.
Rodger is a master storyteller, bringing authenticity to what he teaches about leadership, change, and other important performance issues.
Many years ago, my wife and I took the family on a trip, cross-country trip, small children in a station wagon for 5 days. I'm a survivor. A trip like that is difficult enough, but it's especially difficult in the close quarters of a station wagon where most of the conversations begin with the question, are we there yet? Any of you ever had that? Sure. So to make it easy, my wife and I were very strategic. We decided to make reservations at all of our stops across the country at Howard Johnson hotels because they were exactly alike, cookie cutter. Same drapes, same chairs, same bedspread, same carpet. Everything looked the same. And we even specified when we reserved a room, we wanted the television on the right and the beds on the left. We reasoned that sameness would be comforting. So we're on this cross-country trip. The third night, when we checked into yet another Howard Johnson hotel, we walk into the room, and our wonderful little 4-year-old son says in complete exasperation, Daddy, we've been driving forever and we keep coming back to the same place. Change can feel that way. And we often ask ourselves, are we there yet? When you are strategic about your change, when you are very strategic and explicit about the behaviors that enable change, you don't have to keep asking yourself that, because you're going to know exactly where you are, and you're helping people with the journey, including some of those who weren't real crazy about getting in the car in the first place. They will begin to see, this is really going somewhere. I want to be a part of that. And then when you succeed, success begets success. When you really succeed, you knock it out of the park with one implementation effort, it makes the next ones that much easier because you build competence and you build confidence.
Dr. Duncan makes a point of emphasizing personal accountability for results. In helping people boost performance, he underscores the importance of addressing root causes instead of just treating symptoms.
Accountability is a word that's taken kind of a bad rap. In some circles, accountability has taken on some negative connotations, like, I'm going to hold him accountable. Sounds like a drive-by shooting or something. I'm going to ambush him. I'm going to punish him. Well, accountability, by its true nature, is not punitive. Look at it this way. If you go to the supermarket and purchase some groceries and you're not using a credit card, you're using cash, you're probably not going to have exact change. And the clerk is going to tear off the receipt, give you the receipt, and count out the change, giving an accounting of the transaction. That's not about punishment. Accountability is not punitive. It shouldn't come across as punitive. And when we can help people and ourselves understand that accountability is really just making an accounting for the stewardship with which we have been entrusted, wonderful things can start to happen. And I tell people, I've told them for many years, that the highest performing cultures that I've observed over the years are those where there is a lot of peer-to-peer accountability. Because you can't have enough supervisors, you can't have enough managers to watch people at all times, and hopefully you won't feel like you need to watch people at all times, because that comes across not as supervision, but snoopervision. And that's not what a good culture does. Reminds me of our old family obstetrician. He said, for most folks, it's easier to conceive than to deliver. Now that applies not just to making babies, that applies to getting things done in the workplace. It's fairly easy to come up with ideas. Where the challenge is bringing those ideas to fruition and involving people, engaging people, so that they look forward to coming to work on Monday. They've been glad to be with their families over the weekends, but they look forward to coming back because they know they're making a difference. People are depending on them.
Dr. Duncan draws on his vast reservoir of experiences to drive home critical points about high performance.
In a previous life, I worked in Washington, worked with presidential cabinet officers. During that time, one of them was a man named Henry Kissinger. He was Secretary of State. And one day he asked a couple of bright young guys from his staff to come up, and he told them he wanted them to write a white paper. And in that environment, a white paper is a document that outlines an important issue and then details the various decision options available to the decision maker along with the implications of each decision. They worked on the paper and they sent it upstairs to the Secretary of State. He called him up to his office and he had it in his hand and he said, "Is this the best work you can do?" And they said, "Well, Mr. Secretary, we actually could get some more data from these channels, and there's some more analysis over here that might be helpful." He said, "Well, fine, do it." So they went back and did another draft, and they sent it upstairs, and just like clockwork, he called them up to his office and said, "Is this the best work you can do?" And they said, "Well, actually, Mr. Secretary, there are a couple of more data points that we could include that might be helpful." He said, "Well, please do it." So they're seeing a trend here. So they go do the third draft and they send it up. He calls them upstairs again, said, "Is this your best work?" And they said, "Yes, sir, it is. We've exhausted every resource we have. We believe our analysis is sound. That's our very best work." And he said, "Thank you. This time I'll read it." Now, the takeaway from that story for me is that our employers, our clients, our customers, our colleagues, our families deserve our best work. We need to be adding value at all times. Default skills are important. By default skills, I mean it's automatic. Automatic. In the Kansas City area where we live, my wife served on the board of directors of Habitat for Humanity. You know what that is? Build homes for poor people. And I was over one day helping her with a big project, and they had a blitz build. They built 10 homes in 10 days. And that required hundreds of volunteers. Fortunately, the weather was good. And I went over one day and was helping her with some things, and I was watching some people put up some sheetrock. And these were all volunteers. These were teachers and accountants, etc. There was somebody there who knew how to do it, was coaching them, but These were not sheetrockers. And one guy was really going after it, and he got out of sync. And you know what happened? He slammed his thumb with the hammer, dropped the hammer, grabbed the thumb, and blood was coming off, and the nail was coming off, and he looks around and he says, "Ow!" And always the social scientist, I went over and said, "Do you mind if I ask you some questions?" And he said, "I guess." And I said, "I noticed when you slammed your thumb with the hammer, you said, 'ow.'" He said, "Yeah, it hurts." And I said, "I bet it does." I said, "Is it possible that you might have chosen to say something else?" And he said, "Not with my preacher standing 3 feet away." I said, "So you're telling me that in that instant when the signal from the brain came up from the thumb that said hurt, you kind of rummaged around and you decided to say, 'ow.'" And he said, "Yeah, I guess so." Well, now you know he could do that. You know we can do that, right? We can govern our tongues if we choose to. Here's my point. He was able to say "ow" because he had an "ow" in his toolkit. Now, it wasn't his go-to word, he assured me. But in that instance, he deliberately chose the "ow." Well, that's true with any behavior. When we learn how to lead people, how to listen to people, how to engage people, how to build trust with people, and that becomes our go-to behavior, our default behavior, we still might have some of that distrust, disengagement behavior in our toolkit, but it's going to gather dust. So we can deliberately choose those behaviors that we know get the best results.
If you're looking for a high-content speaker or trainer, Rodger Dean Duncan is your man. No pop psychology or bland platitudes here. His business and leadership savvy are the real deal. His down-to-earth approach to leadership and change helps people feel better, do better, and be better.
About 40 years ago, before the internet, there was a family in the Midwest who had a beautiful daughter. They lived on a farm. She had never been away from home except she went to the state fair for her 4-H projects. She got a scholarship to the state university, and she was going to be gone from home for the first time in her life, and her parents were going to be dearly sorry that she was gone. And they said, "Please write us a letter every week, a good newsy letter so we know you're safe, and let us know what's going on at school." So she did. She was very faithful. She wrote a letter to Mom and Dad every week until late that first semester. A week went by, 2 weeks went by, no letter. They were very concerned. Finally, they got a letter. "Dear Mom and Dad, I'm sorry I haven't written. I got distracted. I think it was primarily because of the fire in the dormitory. They said it started because of the pot party. But I'm okay. I moved out of the dormitory. I'm living with my boyfriend. He says that maybe we can get married after the baby is born. Love, Jane. P.S. There wasn't a fire. There wasn't a pot party. I didn't move out of the dormitory. I don't have a boyfriend. I'm certainly not pregnant. But I am making a D in biology, and I wanted you to keep it in perspective." Things like engaging other people, listening to other people, asking smart questions, challenging the status quo.
For keynotes that inform, enlighten, and lift the spirit, Dr. Rodger Dean Duncan will give your event the long-term impact you want. Don't settle for less.